Welcome to the 7th video on protection of information assets. In this video, we will cover these 4 topics. First three relating to firewalls, and the 4th one will be on shadow IT. Let's get started with the first, which is stateful inspection firewall. So I have simplified the definition for you so that once after watching the video, when you go back to CISA manual, it will be easy for you to go through the theory as well. So what happens in this one? Number 1. Stateful inspection firewall is also called dynamic packet filtering. So please remember this, another name for it. So what it does, a stateful inspection firewall, it tracks the destination IP address of every packet which is leaving the organization's network. Yeah, so it keeps a log for it of what all packets are going from within the organization network to outside and to which IP address. So that is step number 1, which it does. Step number 2 is this firewall, it maps the source IP address of the incoming packet. So when a packet is coming within the organization network, then this firewall checks whether it is coming, number 1, from the IP address to which we from inside, we had sent the request, number 1. Number 2, it checks whether it is coming against the same request or not. As long as these conditions are satisfied, it allows, the stateful inspection firewall, it allows for that packet to come in. And when a response to a packet is received, it records, its record is referenced to determine whether the incoming message was in response to the request that the organization had sent. And you can see that as an example on the diagram on the right hand side. When you are from within the network, you as a user on the left hand side using computer 1, and when you made a request to the bank's server, right? Maybe to get your latest bank statement or to make some transaction. So you made a request to that bank server. And when that transaction is getting updated or when that report is now coming to you, then it is like a reply from that same bank server, right? So it is in response to your request from the IP address to which you had sent the request. And hence this server will allow it. Take the second example. At the bottom of the diagram, you see an evil server, right? So they have named it evil.example.com. And to this server, you had not sent the request for any data, no packet was sent to this server from within the network. And this server is trying to send a packet to your company network. This firewall will not allow. Why it will not allow? Because the firewall will check in its register that there was no packet which was sent earlier from inside the network to this server. And hence it will not find a matching transaction, a matching log. And that is why this particular packet will be blocked by the firewall. So this is how stateful inspection firewall works. Okay. And this approach prevents any attack initiated and originated by the outsider. Okay. So this is how it works. Now, there are few advantages. Let's quickly go through that. Stateful firewalls are aware of the state of connection, right? So they know which all machines from within the network, which all packets they had sent outside the network. So they keep a track of it. Stateful firewalls do not have to open up large range of ports because they are just tracking what is going out and what is coming in is in response to that request. And hence they don't have to define many rules. Okay. Third advantage is stateful firewalls prevent more kind of DOS attacks than the normal packet filtering firewalls. So the traditional packet filtering firewalls are less effective, whereas the stateful, which is also called dynamic packet filtering firewalls, they are more effective. But there are some disadvantages also. What are those? Number 1, stateful firewalls, they are more complex than stateless firewalls. So what are stateless? We will see in the next slide. And then it will be more clear to you Why, what's the difference between these two? Second disadvantage is stateful firewalls, they require more memory and track active connections. Why they need more memory? Because they're keeping a register that which all packets are going out of my network. Yeah, so that's why they need more memory in case the number of users are on the higher side, and the number of websites and the web pages they're accessing is on the higher side. Another disadvantage is stateful firewalls, they are harder to administer. Yeah, and you will see that in the next slide. So then if we are saying you will see that in the next slide, then what is in the next slide? It is the difference between them. So guys, to make it very, very simple, stateless firewalls are rule-based. So they are static. You predefine the rules that 2 + 2 is equal to 4. 2 + 3 is equal to 5. So they are like, the actual programming, I'm just taking a layman example. They are like actual programming and hard coding, which is done, by various applications. So they are called stateless. So just to read out the simple definition, stateful firewall, sorry, that's something which you have already seen. Stateless firewalls, the second bullet, they are however, only focus on individual packets using preset rules to filter traffic. So in the previous slide, guys, you saw in stateful firewalls, there are no preset rules. A register is maintained. In stateless firewalls, register is not maintained, but preset rules are maintained. What is allowed, what is not allowed. Okay. So they are designed to protect network based on the static information, static rules, such as source and destination, which all source can be accessed, which all destinations can be accessed. Okay, so stateless firewall use clues from the destination address, source, and other key values to assess whether threats are present, then block or restrict them. And that is why, it is very important to keep updating these static rules, because otherwise, these signatures, these static rules, they may become redundant or they may become outdated. But in case of stateful, what you are checking against with? You're checking against with the register, which is always getting updated based on which all packets are going out and where. Okay. So then, the question comes in real life as well as in your CISA exam, that which one is better, stateful or stateless? So for that, number one, I have given you a very good comparison table comparing the pros and cons of both the firewalls. So, pause this video for a few minutes and go through each of these bullets, one by one. And I have already summarized the key differences between them. But from your exam perspective, it is important that you sort of, take all these bullet points to your heart. Yeah. And once you understand those, it will be very easy for you to, appreciate that for small businesses in general, it is good to have stateless firewalls as a base. And in case of large organizations, corporation and all those, in general, stateful firewalls play a better role to keep the environment safe. And again, you can pause this particular slide as well and go through all the bullet points. But if I have to just summarize the key point, the key difference, and the key USP, are these. For small business, stateless firewalls make sense in general. And in case of large business corporations, and companies, stateful firewalls are better option as compared to stateless ones. Yeah. But again, please remember, these are the general recommendations. Each company has a different environment, different requirements, so they have to be evaluated in discussion with the senior stakeholders, and understanding what needs to be protected, what data needs to be protected, and what type of attacks need to be prevented, and hence the selection of firewall can vary accordingly. Okay. With that, guys, we move to the next topic, which is shadow IT. This again is a very important topic, and sometimes a real concern area in real life. So let's firstly understand what do we mean by shadow IT. Yeah. So, so shadow IT. See what happens. Let me simplify the definition first. Shadow IT means when some of the IT spends, IT investments, and IT infrastructure, when they are procured and say managed also by people outside of the IT department. And how it is possible? See, guys, what happens? Many department, not many, in many companies, most departments they have their own budget. Yeah. So, for example, procurement department may have their annual operating budget. The admin costs, various project costs for that. For that, suppose they have a budget of 10 crores. Now, to solve a particular problem, say for automation of purchase orders, and their ERP is not doing a great job, say for automation of purchase orders, and their IT department says, oh, we already have hundreds of automation requests lying with us. If you bring your request, we may entertain it next year, because of the backlog which we have. In that case, procurement department may say, oh, I have a budget, right? And this small software which we have to procure license of, this costs only 20 lakh rupees. So I have 10 crore rupee budget with me, 20 lakh, no problem. So they may go ahead and procure this off the shelf software from a third party. They may do their own security evaluation, and without informing, without aligning the IT team, they may install it, or they may use the web version of that software, so no installation also required. By paying 20-25 lakh rupees, they procured the license. Yeah. And these days, guys, you may have seen many of the applications are web based, so you don't need to install anything, any software as well. So this is called shadow IT. Yeah. And let me read the definition. In big organizations, shadow IT refers to IT systems deployed by department other than central IT department to work around the shortcomings. Okay, there is some problem, the main ERP is not working, and the IT department is super busy solving other problems. So my problem is not big for them, and hence I will solve it of my own. When I solve it of my own, that's when it creates shadow IT department. Okay, so what are some of the examples? When I use my personal email account to conduct business, because I raised a request and they said, the license, we have fully consumed the number of license we have for the corporate email ID. So you have to wait for 2 months, but I will not wait. I will use my personal email. Or I wanted, say, an additional computer. Suppose I already have one laptop from company, and I said I want one more, and they said we don't have extra in stock. So what I did, I brought my personal laptop and started using it for the company purpose. So I started accessing my corporate emails from there, corporate files, PPTs, and all those things from there. Yeah, and installing or using some of the third-party software as a service. And as I said, many software as a service, they are coming in the form of web applications. So no installation also required. And hence your IT department may not even get to know that you are making any such arrangement without their information. So, so there are some advantages and some risk, guys, which is involved because of shadow IT. What are the advantages? Why I did this as a user department? Because it lets employee create their own solution. So I had a problem, and IT department was not having time to solve it. So I created my own solution. It delivers solutions closely aligned with business needs. So I wanted my purchase order creation problem to be solved. And this tool, I procured for 20 lakh rupees, for example, and it's solving my problem. It removes obstacle and improves productivity. So obstacles are, for example, your IT department fully busy. They are saying we have a lot of backlog, no bandwidth available right now. And it lessens the burden on IT department. So by following this approach, I actually am feeling that I'm helping IT department by reducing the number of tickets raised to them. But guys, there are some problems also. What are the problems? And you could have sensed some of the problems basis the examples I have shared. But let's look at those. Shadow IT can disrupt the delicate workflow the IT department has spent months or years configuring. So they may have defined that the configuration that once a purchase order is created and approved in SAP, that information will be used for doing the goods receipt. And the information of goods receipt will be used by the next step, which is the vendor invoice booking. Now, if and they may have put in, the incremental controls at each next step. Now, if I plug in a new software, a new app in between, without making it part of the overall design, then whatever design IT department had created earlier, I have somehow overridden it. Yeah. And hence some of the controls, some of the processes may not work. So that's a risk to the organization as well as to the efficiency. When employees rely on different applications from department to department, collaboration becomes inefficient. So for example, since I went for software A to create purchase orders, I am say procurement department, and there's a say finance department, and they said, oh, we also need a software to do purchase orders. And since there is no central repository of which tool which department is using, I may evaluate some other tool, some other software to create purchase order for finance department. And hence, what will happen? Requirement is one, which is to be more efficient in the purchase order process. But there are already two departments, two different solutions. And if that is the case, how the collaboration will happen, right? Because one department is using one tool for the task, another department is using another tool for the same task. Yeah. Security and regulatory, non-compliance, the risk increases because the IT department has not evaluated the security, information security of this tool. You just went ahead because you had budget, you went ahead and you have procured the tool. So it's a potential risk. Then there is a risk of lost data and data leaks, because any software or any application which is in the landscape of IT department, they plan the backup, depending upon how critical that application is. They define the frequency, whether we'll take backup daily, weekly, monthly, how we'll do the restoration testing and so on. Now, if a user department has themselves procured a software, it is not in the knowledge of IT department. So no backup will happen, no restoration testing will happen. And hence there is a risk of loss of data. And data leak is also a risk, because we don't know how reliable that vendor is, how good controls that vendor has put in place on the user company's data security. And without that information security evaluation, if you are taking license and using some software, there is a risk of data leak, right? So there are some advantages, from user perspective, but there are some disadvantages from the organization perspective. Hence, in general, it is recommended to avoid shadow IT and route everything. And that would be my recommendation, to route everything through IT department. If there are some, bottlenecks, some challenges, that's something which have to be strategically addressed instead of creating a shadow IT in itself. So that would be my practical view around it. So these were the concepts I wanted to cover in this video, guys. If you have any question, any query, please write in the comment section below, and one of us will respond to you as soon as possible. Thank you, and see you in the next one.